Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, my entitled neighbor tried to build a fence on my elderly parents' property and dug up their driveway. He thought he could get away with it, but I taught him a lesson he won't forget. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. And the first one starts like this. There are only a few things that can actually get me angry in this world. Messing with my parents is not only on that list, but pretty much on top of it. My parents are in their 80s but healthy and still managing to live in their own home alone. While I don't live with them and never met their neighbor in my entire life, he only had to do one thing to become my sworn enemy. I guess he thought messing with the two old people next door would mean he could get away with it without a single problem. He was not expecting me to get involved in the fight though. My mother called me one day telling me that the neighbor had started putting up posts saying it was where his new fence would go. The only thing is that it was way onto my parents' property and it would end up digging half of their driveway. They have a little bit of an odd driveway where it wraps all the way into the back of the house since their garage is back facing for some reason. His new fence was going to be where my parents had concrete and would not allow them enough clearance to get the car back to the garage. On the behalf of my parents, I decided to go next door and talk to the neighbor myself. My idea at the time was maybe if he realized that they had somebody helping advocate for them, he would realize they were not such an easy target and back down. I still think that it might have worked if I was a big strong-looking guy instead of a guy that's friends call him String Bean and looks like a light breeze could knock me over. Me? Excuse me? I want to talk to you about this new fence you are building. Neighbor, are you the guy from the company? I thought you were coming over later, but I can show you where I want it so you can order the right amount of wood. Me? Actually, I'm the son of the couple that lives next door to you. Your fence plan is way on their side of the property, and I want to just tell you that if you build that fence, I'm gonna make sure that you don't get away with it. He expectantly laughed in my face and closed the door on me. I just wanted to be nice enough to give him a fair warning before I moved forward with the process of destroying him. I know that he did not see me as a threat, but he must have had something in the back of his mind telling him that there might be a problem because he put off the actual destruction of land and building of the fence. My wife was a lawyer, and when I went home, I talked to her about what steps would be best to take in order to make sure that my parents' land got saved and neighbor did not get to bully them. I wanted to right away get a lawyer that was in that field. My wife was part of the family court, so did not handle things like this, and sue him. I was obviously angry and needed to be calmed down by my wife, who told me that before anything happened we had to get a reputable land survey. If we went through a private company or just by old markers on the ground, it could become a problem in court. Unfortunately, it took a while to get the survey, and in the meantime neighbor, I guess, was not worried anymore and started destroying my parents' property in order to build his fence. When the report came back, it turned out that not only did my parents own the land he was building the fence on, but also they owned a small portion of the neighbor's property as well. I took the report and brought it to the neighbor, warning him one last time to stop what he was doing and pay for the repairs for the damage he had done. I guess this guy was pretty cocky because even with proof in front of his face, he did not care and told me not to come to his house again or else he would call the police. That was fine because I had no intention of coming back to his house, and instead I was now going to find my parents a lawyer. I know that this was technically their fight, but I got so invested and basically took it over. They are old, but they are fully capable of fighting their own battles. I just decided to take this one personally. Anyway, I found a lawyer, and after explaining the situation and showing the paperwork, he told me that this seemed pretty open and shut of a case. A formal document was sent to the neighbor requesting to put a stop to this construction and pay the money for damages. Once that got ignored, we were able to take him to court where a judge would force him to accept what was on the document. There was no question of if he was going to have to stop and pay to fix my parents' driveway. With what the survey found out though, there was something else potentially at play. Neighbor had a pool in his yard, and while there is no law against that, it ends up crossing where the actual property line is. That means if my parents wanted to, they could request in the same court hearing that in addition to the fence, his pool was also encroaching on their property and they want it removed. I think you can all guess what I would choose, but it wasn't my choice since I was not the homeowner. My parents are both sweet people that if they found this out in any other kind of situation, they probably would have just done nothing and let things be. I had to get my pettiness from somewhere though, and you can bet that it came from my dear old mom and dad. They figured if neighbor was going to be a total a-hole, that they could play the same kind of game back at him. With that, the suit was filed and we just had to wait for the day to show up in court. Again, since it wasn't actually my lawsuit or property, I had to sit in the back and was not allowed to say or do anything. That was fine though, because the lawyer I got for my parents was more than capable of destroying the neighbor. The only defense he really had was his survey that was from an unreliable source. When he tried to argue, there was no way for him to know that his was not accurate. My lawyer showed that he signed the certified mail that included a survey as well as legal documents stating to stop his construction. His other argument was that he needed a fence to be placed there due to other reasons like noise problems. I could almost hear the judge laugh at the thought of my two elderly parents being so loud that a fence would need to be built. It did not matter because him having a fence was not the problem. He was allowed to build one just on his own property. It was when the judge said that the pool also had to be removed that you could see neighbor finally realizing he was not going to win. He had to pay to have the driveway fully repaired, his pool removed, and a new fence was built now much closer to his house than he wanted it to be. My parents were just happy to get some peace, and I was glad that the neighbor learned not to mess with them. Just because your neighbors might be old, that doesn't mean that they are easy targets to take advantage of. They are capable of fighting their own battles and usually have a bunch of people in their corner to help. And yeah, ripe stars, these are some of the people that I despise the most. The kind of people that take advantage of the elderly. So that's why the result of this story is even sweeter. I have no sympathy or empathy for anyone that takes advantage of elderly people. Anyway, the next story is titled The Typical Walmart Karen. Okay, so I have an EBT card and thanks to the slow mail service I got my card with about 4 months of money on it. Yay! And by the way, ripe stars, apparently an EBT card is an electronic benefits transfer card, which I suppose replaces food stamps in California. But anyway, I was at the checkout, this young lady was in front of me and I noticed that she had baby food, formula and other food for small children. No snacks, just crackers and baby stuff. The cashier said to her, "I'm sorry, it says insufficient funds." She tried again, same result. Well, this woman looked as if the entire world was ending, so I said, "Excuse me, can you just add my stuff on and I'll just pay for it?" The young lady protested, saying she couldn't pay me back. I let her know that it was my pleasure and asked her if she had any food for herself. She just shook her head and said she would walk to the church for food. I asked her if she wanted to grab a few things for herself: frozen pizza, spaghetti egg rolls, cheese and crackers, bread extra, etc. Again, she said no, so I just put my bread, cheese and some frozen dinners into her bags and wished her luck. I finished up and went to replace my items. This woman who was making rude little huffs and puffs behind me begins to follow me. I get my items and go to the area where you can get lotto tickets and cigarettes. As I am paying, this Karen says, "You can add mine to her, seeing that she's paying for strangers today." I just looked at the cashier who I am friendly with and laughed. I did not really think she was serious. "Karen, what? You paid for her and you gave her some of your stuff." "I'm a single mom, I'm not rich like you." "Oh honey, you know nothing." I just shook my head. "Karen, hey, you!" "Excuse me." "Me, what?" "Karen, you are so rude." "Okay." Karen sputters. "Well?" "Me, already done." "What?" "Karen, she is paying for me. She's got my items." Cashier, "No she doesn't. Have a wonderful day, honey." Hands me my receipt. Karen, "Why are you so selfish?" "I need to feed my kids too." Me, "Sounds like a you problem." Karen, "Who do you think you are?" "I need help." Me, "I realize your problems are valid and I do sympathize with you, but I cannot help you, so please." Cashier, "Miss, this is the 4th time in 2 days you have been asked to stop harassing customers." Karen, I'm not doing anything wrong. I noticed a large man with a badge, not a cop, I think it was loss prevention, approached and told her to leave. I was walking out when I heard her starting to screech about how she has no money for her groceries and she expected someone to help her. F you, Karen. And the next one is titled Getting Revenge on a Fraudster. So, back in the day, my aunt lived in a council house in a rough area of London. She was caring for her young child and my uncle was working. They were tired of the city life and this area had a lot of violence, drugs and the like. She wanted better for her child and family. So she decided to put in for a house swap to Devon, which when you live in a council property you can do. My family had just moved there, talked about how nice it was and the like, and so she filed to swap. Soon she had found a nice little 2-bedroom flat and was scheduled to swap with a guy, details unknown. Everything went through fine and they moved to Devon and began a much calmer, safer life. My aunt is a very meticulous person and so as soon as she knew she was moving, she arranged for all of the posts to be sent to the new address on the appropriate date. However, there were about 3 days in between where some post was still sent to her old address. And unfortunately, this included 2 bank statements, one for my aunt and one for my uncle. Now, any decent person would just throw them out or forward them, send them back to the post office, etc., but not this guy. He proceeded to open that mail, an illegal offense, take the info to the Department of Records and locate my aunt's mother's maiden name. He then proceeded to attempt to open many credit cards in her and my uncle's name. Fortunately for her, she was notified of this suspicious activity and managed to prevent this fraud from happening, which would have ruined both of their credit and destroyed their chances of getting a mortgage, which they eventually did. My aunt reported this to the police, however, as no crime of fraud had actually been committed, stopped by the banks and my aunt, there were no grounds for criminal charges. Now, see, this POS had not been as meticulous as my aunt in redirecting his mail, and so the letters began to pile up. My aunt decided tit for tat and opened some of the letters. It turns out this guy was in some pretty serious debt and had been avoiding the debtors, moving being a pretty big way of getting away from them. This guy, before committing his attempted fraud, had asked my aunt to not give out his address. So much aunt did what anyone would do and called up the debtors one by one, told them that the guy no longer lived at the address. They were obviously disappointed until she gave them the new address, to which they were delighted. Now they knew where he was and began to hound him for the debt he owed. So much so that he lost that lovely council property, which if he had stayed in, purchased and then sold on, would be worth quite a bit of money, since the area has now undergone a lot of investment and growth, because he had to skip town to get away from his debtors. If he had been an upstanding citizen and not a craphead, he would have gotten away with it and lived a relatively carefree life. And the next one is titled Getting Revenge on a Terrible Person. 2 years ago, I met a man in a bar. He approached me and we started chatting. He was very charming, intelligent and charismatic, so we exchanged numbers and began dating. He was very attentive and sweet, single, never been married, no children. He is beginning to sound like Prince Charming. I am also a little naive and have not had a lot of experience with relationships. We see each other regularly and he is in constant contact with me via phone. He texts me all day, every day. We exchange hundreds of messages every day when we were not together. 6 weeks after we meet, he begins telling me how much he dislikes his current living arrangement and how awful his housemates are and how he wants to move out. I live in a large home by myself and he hints whether he can move in. I think this is a little fast, so I don't offer him a place to stay with me. He never mentions moving again. We continue to see each other and talk all day every day. We talk about the future, marriage, holidays, kids, etc. He had told me previously about how wealthy he is, how he owns multiple homes and businesses around the world. And yes guys, press X to doubt. Anyway, which is why it was surprising 8 months into the relationship when he started asking me for money when he started his new business. I declined to give him any money as I have noticed a lot of little lies and inconsistencies with his stories and behavior. He is also very controlling and constantly nagging me. I start to cool off on him as things are not adding up. He assures me everything he has said is true and he would never lie to me and he loves me so much and would never hurt me. Something feels off still. I start sleuthing him online, trying to find information about him, but nothing comes up. So I end things with him. He begs me back. I am dubious, but I continue to talk to him as I am very curious about finding out who this guy I fell in love with really is. I hired a private investigator to find out, as I just cannot shake my gut instinct that something bad is going on. I was devastated to find out the truth. He in reality has been married for 10 years and lives with his wife and 2 kids. He's been married 3 times and has 5 kids. He is also broke. He lied about his age, where he grew up, childhood, etc. He has a serious mental health disorder. He is a pathological liar and chronic manipulator. I did realize this by the end. He sleeps with men on the down low and has a harem of women. He perpetuates love fraud schemes for attention, money and acquisitions. He has conned his friends out of money. The list is just endless. I confront him, he lies and says it is not true. I am livid and I tell him to get lost. He goes for one last try to con money out of me again. So the revenge is, I blast him on social media from an anonymous account to warn his future victims. I also post screenshots of the dossier provided by the PI. It creates a huge amount of interest and goes viral. It turns out this guy has screwed over more people than originally thought and people want justice. I have left the state I was living in when this occurred 3 months ago and I am trying to move on with my life. Always trust your gut instincts. And the next one is titled Getting Karma Instantly. I witnessed the most wonderful unfolding of instant karma in the shopping center car park earlier this evening. I was waiting for my Chinese takeaway to be ready and was walking my dog around the edge of the car park. Bozo comes out of the supermarket, unloads his shopping trolley into the back of his rather lovely SUV. Rather than walk 5 meters to the trolley bay, he gives his shopping trolley a mighty shove out into the middle of the car park. There was no one else driving around and it did not hit any other car, fortunately. He then leaps into his car, throws it into reverse and reverses out of his parking bay at speed. What he has not seen is that the trolley, after being shoved aside, has hit a small speed hump and rolled its way back, stopping directly behind his car. The crunch as he hit it was enormously satisfying. The trolley tipped over and became wedged under the back of the car. It was just beautiful. And the next one is titled Petty Revenge on Drunk Inconsiderate House Guests. So I had a group of friends over for a typical booze and schmooze party and several of them asked to sleep over given that they had too much. So yeah, absolutely, I have a spare room and of course there's the couch. Late into the evening, party winds down, other guests start to leave one by one. Start doing a little pickup and notice that both beds are taken with a collection of intoxicated inconsiderates. Only one not in a bed. Me, no room on either. Finish my cleaning, went to my bedroom, slide the pillows out from under their heads. I pull all the covers off, leaving some uncovered drunks snoozing away, and I crank the AC down to 58. I take all the pillows and covers to the couch and have a nice cozy sleep. And wow guys, I gotta say, considering that this is a petty revenge story, I would say that's a pretty mean revenge. Maybe it could even be dangerous if someone catches a cold or maybe something even worse. But maybe I'm just overthinking. Anyway, thank you for watching, I hope to see you again tomorrow.